I just hit record. Shall we start?
Sure.
Cheryl, would you like to go first, or Sherry?
Sure, I can go first and try and make it brief. That way
So
gives
this
you
is
lots of
Cheryl
time.
Brumbaugh-Cayford, a longtime member of Fox Valley Citizens for Peace and Justice, and a scholar and an adventurer who will tell us about her trip to Nigeria as a delegate from the Church of the Brethren.
Thanks. Can I share screen?
Yes, let me,
Okay. Thank you so much for this opportunity to share with you.
wait
I
a
was in
minute.
I was in Nigeria in March for the 100th anniversary of Ecclesia Yanoa Nigeria, which is the Church of the Brethren in Nigeria, or EYN for short. And I was on a delegation in my role as a Director of News Services for the Church of the Brethren in the United States. And I first have to tell you, it was a return home for me, because I'll give you any bit of background. My parents were Church of the Brethren mission workers in Nigeria. My father started there as a conscientious objector during the Korean War, and he fell in love with Nigeria. And after his term as a CO, he came back to the States, got married to my mom. They both went back to Nigeria, and then they worked and lived there for something like 30 years. So I was born there. I was born in a really small village of Garkida in northeast Nigeria, which was the mission headquarters at the time. And at age 2, my parents were assigned to the city of Jos to work at an international school. And so I lived in Jos until I graduated from high school, and then went to university in Southern California. So anyways, I'd only been back to Nigeria a couple times since I stopped living there. And the last time before March was in 2018, about 5 years ago. And then I was able to go back this March. So I'd first like to share a bit about the church called EYN, which I think gives you a sense of Northeast Nigeria in a way that you may not see in the news. EYN considers its birthday or founding as March 17, 1920. And I'm going to start sharing screen just to show you a glimpse of hold on just a minute, a glimpse of the joy of the celebration of the church. This is one of the women's choirs singing at a finale celebration at what's called the Nigeria's National Cathedral, and they maxed out the place. 10,000 people were at this celebration. But this is one of the Nigerian choirs that sang there. So the founding of the church in Nigeria was by 2 Church of the Brethren mission workers, Stover Culp and Albert Helser. And they held their first worship service in Garkida under this tamarind tree, which is still there. And it is the center now of a small park with a plaque naming its significance. I want to talk a bit about the risks and dangers of the first mission workers, which gives you a chance to understand the risks and dangers of living in Nigeria in the Northeast at the time, in the early 20th century. Both of the wives of the first 2 Americans who traveled to Nigeria to live there with their husbands. And within the first year of arrival, Ruth Culp and her newborn baby both died in 1924. So I attribute myself some of the success of the Church of the Brethren mission in Nigeria to the fact that it was a peace church. We are a peace church, and we are also focused on social and human well-being. And the Nigerian church, Nigerians welcomed the work of the mission in areas of healthcare, education, safe water, agriculture, what we consider development work today. So the Nigerian church soon began to grow. And here you see, I'm trying to do full screen, and I'm not figuring out how to do it. But you'll see here the first four Nigerians to join the church in 1927, and they were baptized. And with Albert Helser at the left are Risku Zidiku Madziga and Pilasar Mshalasawa. They were the only two who then continued in the Christian faith. At the time, Northeast Nigeria was either animist or Muslim, and it's then and now hard to leave Islam to move to Christianity and vice versa. So the church also grew because the first mission workers had a character that spoke to Nigerians, and Stillbrook Hope in particular is beloved as someone who stood up against the British colonial powers of the time. And there are stories of him sort of battling with colonial officials from the British rulers on behalf of the Nigerians. I want to show you a map from 1972 of the Nigerian mission. You can see in the inset, here's the map of Nigeria up in the left-hand corner here. The inset, this shaded area, was the area called Lardin Gabas, which translates as Eastern District. And that was the first name for EYN, or Ecclesia Yanoa Nigeria now. And you can see the range of the way the growth of the mission and the growth of the church happened. All these little dots show places where there were things that had been built or planted or developed: churches, schools, leprosarium, hospitals, clinics, all sorts of institutions were grown and built as part of the mission alongside churches. So the EYN's success in this northeast part of Nigeria became, because it's predominantly Muslim, you have to know that the north of Nigeria is predominantly Muslim and the south is predominantly Christian. So this made EYN a target of Islamist insurgents and extremists as in most more recent years as the church grew. So EYN, this is a picture, these are two maps, EYN in 1983 alongside a map of the towns overtaken by Boko Haram in 2014. So you'll see here's this part, here's at the left, top left, EYN sort of heartland. And then you see here the map of the places that Boko Haram took over in 2014. This is a BBC map. And you'll see the overlay. They're in basically the same area of Nigeria.
Oh my gosh.
Which is interesting to me. There's a lot of reasons for it. Well, we can't go into all of it now. So what happened is that EYN has grown recently into a church of more than 1 million members. And in late 2014, which is just 9 years ago, Boko Haram started taking over towns and villages in EYN's area to create their own caliphate. And so EYN leaders had to flee for their lives. Their headquarters were overtaken. Many EYN churches were attacked, burned, bombed. This gradually ramped up toward 2014, and the height of it was 2014 to about 2016 or 2017. At least 10,000 EYN members were killed. Many thousands more had to flee to various parts of Nigeria and also to Cameroon. Lots of people ended up in refugee camps over the border in Cameroon, and others were in IDP camps around Nigeria for internally displaced people. It's what IDP stands for. So in this period of time, the US church stepped up and with EYN collaborated on what's called the Nigeria Crisis Response. And American Brethren raised more than $5 million for this. So since then, the violence has subsided. The Nigerian government was pretty ineffectual in its military. Were pretty ineffectual for a long time in taking care of this, but in recent years, for a variety of reasons, the insurgency has subsided. And since then, EYN has moved back to its headquarters. A lot of people have been able to move back to their homes and reclaim them. A lot of churches have been rebuilt. There's been a lot of recovery, and the area is so much safer even than when I went in 2018. But the violent attacks and abductions continue. You'll have heard of kidnappings and things like that happening in Nigeria. So to give you a sense of how they're continuing, just the latest report from last week, reported by EYN, was that there was an attack on a village near Garkita in which 6 people were killed, and EYN church and pastors' houses were among the properties destroyed. And that was an attack by Boko Haram, and now it's /ISWAP, which is Islamic State West Africa Province, which is the latest iteration of Islamist terrorism in West Africa. EYN has maintained a peace witness in its own way. When I was there in March, I had a chance to interview EYN President Joel Billy, who's a remarkable person. And he talked to me about how EYN expresses its peace witness, which a lot of people have credited for not exploding the situation into an even more major problem. Imagine if the Christians were retaliating in a very active way, what the bloodbath would have been in the end. EYN is not a pacifist church. You have to understand that. It accepts the help of the Nigerian military for its own survival. So, for example, there are armed guards at all of the centenary events that I attended in March. There are armed guards at the gates of many of the larger churches. But when you're in Northeast Nigeria, you're in virtually a war zone still. And so EYN does what it has to do to survive. But EYN President Billy talks about it this way. He said, "We relate with people without condemning them, without looking down on them, irrespective of their doctrine or creed or whatever. We blend with them without losing our brethren, creed, and heritage. We frown at war. No one should seek vengeance." This is the key statement. When he talks to other churches in Nigeria, they at first have said, this is what he said, other churches said, "What nature of men are these?" But they got used to us. They've come to realize that we are the worst hit church, the most persecuted. We say no going to war, no life taking, go the extra mile, turn the other cheek. It sounds stupid to many, but we say, you are reading the scripture upside down. The scripture says, forgive 7 times 70. There's no limit to forgiveness. If someone kills your wife, your husband. And this is the point where I come to tears, because this was in the interview I did with him. And at that moment in the interview, he paused, and there was this long pause. And in that moment, I could feel the weight of the Nigerian brethren experience, the reality of people being killed. So if someone kills your wife, if someone kills your husband, this is what actually happened to thousands of people. President Billy continued, we just have to forgive. It will give forgiveness to ourselves and peace of mind. Forgiving has given me great peace of mind.
He's nuts.
So I wanted to share that because it's very meaningful to me, and it gives a sense of the situation of a country where you have this choice to make. What do you do with the violence that's going on around you? How do you deal? How do you survive? How do you make it better? So somehow EYN has survived for 100 years. If we end up with a bit of time, I'll play a video clip from the women's choir singing a Thanksgiving song for their survival. But I want to mention, I'll stop sharing for a minute. I want to mention the overall political situation. As of earlier this year in February, there were national elections, federal elections. It was a critical election because Nigeria is one of the largest democracies in the world. The ruling party's candidate was being challenged by an upstart who had a lot of support, particularly from younger people and the more educated folk. So the results of the election are disputed. I don't know if you followed this at all in the news. Bola Tinubu, the nominee of the ruling All Progressives Congress, or APC, is alleged by some, and I heard this a couple times from different people, and I saw it in the news. You can search his name and find out his background, but he is alleged to have ties to the Islamist insurgents. He was declared the winner, but the younger generation supported his opponent, and they continue to say that their candidate actually won the election. So to understand why this is important on the world stage, you have to understand that Nigeria is the most populous country in Africa. It's on track to become the third most populous country by the year 2050. Nigeria's population was estimated at 206 million in 2020, which makes it the seventh most populous in the world right now. The population is growing at 2.6% a year, which is one of the fastest rates in the world. At this rate, Nigeria's population will double within the next 25 to 30 years. Nigeria's youth and young adults are part of what's called a youth bulge. The country has the largest population of youth in the world. Median age of 18. Median age of the country is 18. About 70% of the population is under 30. 42% are under the age of 15. This means that Nigeria is already one of the most influential countries in the world and will just become ever more so as that population grows into full adulthood. If you look at what happened with the Boko Haram insurgency in the Northeast, now ISWAP, it happened in large part because young men of marriageable age were unable to find jobs and were easily enticed into radical religion or radical violence with offers of money and property, in part so they could get married. In Nigerian culture, you don't get married till you have the means. If you don't get married, in a lot of African understandings, worldview, if you don't have children, then you are cut off from the future line, the line that continues into the future. So you understand a bit of the meaning of even just getting a job, having a livelihood is part of your whole participation in society, in the future, in the well-being of the world, etc. So one could talk a lot about how young people are radicalized in various countries around the world, but in Northeast Nigeria and parts of Nigeria, you're radicalized because you're offered means for livelihood. And so you pay your dues by taking part in violence. One could talk a lot about which countries and which individuals are providing the money for this, because someone's putting a lot of money into it. A lot of arms and a lot of weaponry have been poured into Northeast Nigeria in the last couple of decades. Some people blame Saudi Arabia, some people blame the more extreme parts of Saudi Arabia and other parts of the Middle East. But again, that's a whole PhD topic. So the concern, I think, will only grow as this youth bulge continues. And it's not, Nigeria is not the only one with this country with this situation. So that's enough for now. I'll stop. If you want to see the clip, the video clip of the Nigerian Women's Choir, I can do it, but I would give space to Sherry now for her presentation. This is amazing, Cheryl. I had no idea you had this history. I have a zillion questions. Let's move on to Sherry, and then let's do some open discussion. But thank you for this amazing
conversation.
Sure.
Sherry Liske is a beloved member of Fox Valley Citizens for Peace and Justice and Occupy Elgin. And she is a unique activist in her own right, traveling around the world and all around Elgin doing good work. Take it away, Sherry.
Okay. Thank you so much. Good morning, everybody. Thank you for this opportunity to talk about my experience in the Mexico mission. My presentation is completely opposite of Cheryl's. I don't have any slides, and I'm only going to be talking with my house background here. And one of the reasons why I don't have any slides is because my work is personal. I interact with people on face to face, and I just felt that I didn't want to, not that I didn't want to share their pictures, but I didn't. The more as I thought about it, I didn't want to do like an exploitation of the type of poverty that I see, because that's actually what the focus of my experience is. As far as social issues. So anyway, I go on what I call the Mexico mission. And I go with a group of people from around the United States, mostly from the state of Maine. And I've been doing work with this group for more than 20 years. So it's the same group of people, and it's mostly, it's like 90% medical professionals, doctors, nurses, lab technicians, pharmacists, just whoever joins the group at any given mission date. So what we do is we did start off in Playa del Carmen. That's where I met this group. And but after a few years, we moved to another part of Mexico. And this would be nice if I had a slide. The Yucatan Peninsula. If you can think of the Yucatan Peninsula, which sort of is like at the southeastern part of the Gulf of Mexico. We fly into Cancun, which most people would know where that is. It's kind of a straight shot down. Just only takes a few hours, so that's kind of convenient. However, once we get there, we all meet up at the airport, and we drive down to the southern part of the state of Quintana Roo, which is also in the Yucatan Peninsula, and it's sort of a straight shot down 6 hours. So once we fly into Cancun and meet up, we drive 6 hours down to the town where we work. And it's a rural town. It's in the agricultural area, and the main crop is sugarcane. And the town that we stay in and that we work in, it is sort of a central town in that area, because it has a factory, and it's a sugarcane processing factory. So all the crops are, once they're harvested, the sugarcane is brought to this factory in these large, huge trucks. And sometimes it's caravans, and it's processed there. And the main buyer of that sugar is Coca-Cola. So that's that connection there. So what we do is we work in a Red Cross clinic. We work intimately with the Red Cross, and there's a rather large Red Cross clinic in the town. And one thing is that we provide like a primary care clinic, and then like a doctor's visit, like regular doctor's visit. So because we've been going there for so many years, we're sort of like, we know many of the people. So we do a lot of follow-up care. So it could be like a one-off, something's wrong with a person or their family member, and they come in to see the doctor. Or it could be like follow-up care for for people who have diabetes, hypertension, different things like that. It was the same doctor for at least 15 years. So you could say that he was their doctor almost. There is some other medical care, healthcare in the area, but it's like layered. So there's public facilities, and then there's a small hospital in the town, but you have to have insurance in order to go to that hospital. And that insurance you would get if you were an employee of the factory. So, there's obviously perks to having a regular job. And so I don't want it to seem as though there's no medical care at all. There is medical care available, and there's also a larger city about an hour away that has a couple of hospitals. So, but one thing that the Red Cross does, they run a clinic also. You can go in and see a doctor there, but they are really the emergency care. So they have at least 2 really well-equipped ambulances. So if there's an accident in the fields, or if there's a car accident, they would go out and be the regular EMTs, or people bring in people. Okay, so people bring in people who have got hurt out in the field. So there could be an accident, and then they would have emergency care there at the Red Cross. And then if needed, they would take them to this bigger city, to the hospital. So that's sort of the healthcare thing there. Oh, let's see. As far as other things that we do beside the clinic, we do what's called an outreach. And so at least one day, we will have a clinic in another town. So we'll pack up and we'll have like a portable clinic. I have kind of known for my backpack in a clinic. So I can do like a whole intake. I can do a whole clinic out of a backpack. So that's kind of, it's actually kind of fun, sorry. And so we know, like I said, we've been going there for so many years that we know a lot of people. And I've gone on almost every mission trip. It's a big part of what I do. So we go 1 to 2 times a year. So we may have been there at least maybe 30 times. So like I said, we get to know the people, we get to know their needs. And one thing that's nice about that is that we're able to communicate what is it that you need, not what we think that you need, so we participate in a lot of personal discussions on what people need, and especially for the Red Cross Clinic. So we've been able to work together on a lot of equipment. And one of the nicest things that I've ever seen in my life is when we came, we were just there in March. And when we went to the clinic, okay, so I didn't say, we also do, there's also a surgical component of the mission. So they do minor surgeries, and then surgery up to, like, say, the level of hernias. So, they're not doing heart surgery or anything like that, but they do quite a few surgeries, because at least 2 surgeons come with the group, and then the anesthesiologist and the techs and recovery people. And what the people at the Red Cross Clinic did this year is they completely remodeled the operating room, and they doubled it in size. And another thing is, we are the only group of anybody outside of their community that goes to this area. It's not like some areas, I don't know if you know this phenomena of like 6 different groups going to one town, and then things just get redone all the time. That's sort of like a thing in mission work, but we are the only group that goes to this town. So anyway, they specifically like redid this whole operating room, and it was a surprise. So when everybody walked in, I mean, people were in tears. I mean, because it was just so beautiful. I mean, for people to work that hard to do something means that they're invested in the group, they're invested in their community. And that's a really beautiful thing to see. Let's see, so one of the things about the outreach that I specifically myself have really developed, and it's not like super formal or anything, believe me. So this area is agricultural area, and they have a lot of migrant workers. The migrants usually are coming from other states in Mexico. Many people are from Chiapas, and they are housed in these migrant camps, quote unquote, where there are like usually buildings that are made of cement, and they're one level buildings, and they're like one room apartments, so to speak, with a little cooking area out in the front. Well, there's usually one in each small town along this one main road. And so what we've been doing over the years is going to these worker camps and bringing some foodstuffs, bringing some clothes, some shoes, and bringing other material needs that are like basics. And that's something that we have been doing. And it's really cool because this past March, one of the ladies who lives in the camp, first of all, she asked us not to take any pictures. And that's another reason why I'm not showing any pictures, is because sometimes they specifically ask for no pictures. But she told somebody else, she's pointing at me, I know her, she's been here before. So yeah, I mean, it's kind of fun that way. And then like I said, then we're able to talk to people, and because we do return to the same place, we're able to bring things that people want. And I mean, there's basic needs that you don't even have to think that hard about what people may want in their daily lives. So as far as social and economic and environmental topics related to this, so of course one is economic, and just one thing that I noticed, because it kind of intersects with some other things like education and different things and family life. So one of the families that I know there, the last couple of times I've been there, the kids aren't around, and it had been 3 years. That's the other thing. It had been 3 years since we were there because of COVID. So of course all the kids grow up. I mean, kids grow fast. I mean, you're there, 1 year, and 2-3 years later, they look like adults. But anyway, there's a family of 5 kids that I know, and none of the kids were home. The one daughter got married and has a baby, and she must be about 15 or 16. And then the 4 boys, they weren't in school, they were out working, and working means they were out in the cane fields. So they're like probably 12 and under, and they're already working out in the fields. So, it sort of reminds me of like maybe stories from like 100 years ago, 150 years ago, where people, kids had to go to work, for their families to bring in some income. So it's sort of like, I guess I would say it's sort of like that for actually a lot of families that live in this area that we go to. So that's one thing. And then I had mentioned in my sentence about disability, I wanted to, because I know a gentleman who's became disabled from a motorcycle accident, and his life is really quite interesting. We visit him every time we go, and so we've known him for maybe 7 years now. So we're able to sort of, at first we were like really able to help him with a lot of his therapy type stuff, because we had physical therapists come also. So we were for sure able to teach him a lot of things, bring him some adaptive equipment, and just support him in different ways. And so a couple things. He works, and his work is to sell, he's like a entrepreneur, I guess you could say. He sells candy and different things from his wheelchair. He made like a shelf for his wheelchair where he sells from the wheelchair. So that's kind of interesting. But the thing is, this year or in March, he lives now in a one-room, a shack. I mean, you wouldn't have chickens living in it here in the United States, but he has this building, this small little wooden house that he lives there with his son. And his son is now a teenager. So when we first met him, he was a little kid, actually. But his dad supports him through this selling candy, and they live together, and they're just like a unit. And it's it's like, it's heartwarming. It's so beautiful because their relationship is beautiful, but it's in a circumstance that you would not wish on a chicken, I mean, it's just incredible. Anyway, so of course they were happy to see us, and we were all having, a big reunion. So let's see if there were, environmental. Yeah, so a lot of things environmental. One is the way they cook. A lot of ways that people cook in that area is just with wood. Like they go to the woods, and so to speak, and they just get sticks, and then they're just, cooking on open fire. So I know that's not, particularly good for the environment. Another thing is that burning of that sugar cane. They burn the cane. That's like part of the process of harvesting, is they burn it, and then all the critters run out. And so that, I mean, you can just see on a nice day when they're not burning, it's beautiful. The sky is blue, the green sugar cane is blowing in the breeze, and it's just like idyllic, and then some days it's like, oh, they're burning, and there's just all this black smoke everywhere and particles everywhere, and that's kind of a mess. And then the last thing I wanted to bring up was what's called a Maya train. So the government of Mexico is working with the Chinese government, from my understanding, and they're building what's called a Maya train. And I have a lot of different thoughts about it, but one big thought is what it's going to do is it's going to connect a lot of different points in the Yucatan Peninsula that have Mayan tourist value, so to speak. And it's supposed to open the end of this year. Actually, there's apparently ahead of schedule. But a couple of things about it is even the people that live in the area, they're really skeptical about, first of all, about any corruption that is going on regarding the train and the finances of it. But one of the things that they're concerned about is the environment, because it was supposed to be like a clean energy project, and now it's like straight up diesel. So that's one of the things that people were concerned about. And another thing they were concerned about is about their heritage. The people, many of the people who live in that area are Mayan, have Mayan and indigenous heritage. And they're concerned about like disrupting the relics, so to speak. And apparently I did read something where there have been already at least 8,000 relics and different things like that uncovered as they're building and digging and building this Maya train. So that was a concern of the people who live there. But, it's an economic engine, so to speak, pun intended, and they're hoping to, increase tourism or make it easier. we'll see, because there's another airport also that's going to be opening up right outside Tulum, another international airport. So tourism is good for the economy, and it's not good for a lot of reasons that we talk about here in this group. So let's see, because I do like to end up in a positive note on everything. It was really great that we were able to resurrect this group, and that we are also making plans for this coming October. So we're going to try and get back on our twice a year venture. So there you go.
Wow.
Wow. Just amazing. So who would like to, who has questions for Cheryl or Sherry?
I have one for Sherry. And I had a neighbor at the door, so I had to leave, and you tell me if you talked about this. When you talked about the people's concerns with the Maya train, were they at all concerned about China coming in?
No, no, that wasn't, that didn't even come up.
That's interesting.
Yeah.
Who is building the train?
The, well, Mexican, so they have, Mexican and Chinese engineers, and the labor is Mexican. And that was part of like some concerns about the people who own the sugarcane fields, because there's some small owners, like it's a really big deal. Like there's big landowners and then there's small landowners. If you're a family there in this area and you can buy a few hectares and grow sugarcane, I mean, you're making it, you're progressing in your own family economics. But then it's harder to find people to work in the fields because they're going to work on the Maya train. So, and actually sort of good for them because they're getting paid more. I mean, this is workers in the fields who are cutting cane. This is labor exploitation at its worst.
Yeah.
I mean, these guys are making, or guys, women, it's mostly guys. These guys are making like $1 an hour. And I swear they are literally out in the hot sun cutting sugarcane with machetes, and it's good they have work, but that is exploitation. I mean, that's the classic.
There was a protest song, maybe, or it could be at least 15 years old, but it was Coke and about Coke and its involvement with the sugarcane fields and saying, "We'll rot your teeth," and it was so forth. And it was how Coke was exploiting the people.
It's happening this morning. I mean, I can tell you it's happening out there right now. Yes. And then, well, don't get me started on Coca-Cola. Not only is it a major international company, but Coca-Cola is horrid and everybody drinks Coke. Everybody. The size of those 2 and 5 liter bottles, whatever they sell, oh my gosh, and everybody drinks it. Everybody. It's like so bad for your health.
Sherry, is the sugar cane a company that that manufactures this the sugar? Is it a local operation, or is it a national one owned by Mexicans, or is it a multinational outfit?
Okay, so to my understanding, the actual factory is owned by Mexicans, but I mean, I wouldn't put all my money on it, but yeah, that's a local factory. And they actually even have unions there. So some of the people are in unions. So they do have some worker power, and they do have, like I said, they have benefits. I mean, they have pay. I mean, they have pretty good wages. I mean, people want to work at the factory. I mean, that's good pay there. And you get like health benefits. You can go to that little hospital I was talking about. And I've been in that hospital. It's good. I mean, for the size of it, it's very good. But yeah, no, I do believe the factory is owned by a probably Mexican company. Yeah. But they sell it, but their number one client is Coca-Cola. I don't know if you guys are familiar with this thing about the Mexican Coke. Like it's a real thing. People like want to drink this Mexican Coca-Cola because it's made from sugar cane, which may have been produced right where I go. I mean, it's a good chance.
I have a question for Cheryl. Cheryl, in Nigeria, are there Muslims who are not fundamentalists and are not violent and are,
Yeah, absolutely. So for example, when I was growing up there, Muslims and Christians lived side by side. None of this was happening. It's been ramped up in recent decades. Just like the radicalization of Islam around the world. And so, for example, there are Muslims who are what you call centrist, who are in leadership, for example, I think it's Adamawa State, which is where the EYN headquarters are located, who are supportive of EYN in part because it is a peace church and it's not retaliating. And there have been Muslim leaders in a couple of the states in the Northeast who have been known to give equally to mosques and to church rebuilding. So one of the real tragedies of the Boko Haram insurgency in ISWAP is that they also attack centrist Muslims. So they took out mosques as well as churches, not as many, not as often, but they've attacked traditional leaders who are Muslim, who are not supportive of the extremism. So they're extremists in all the wrong ways. But the centrist Muslims, most Muslims in Nigeria are not part of that. Now that, if you talk to Christians, they'll have a critique of Islam itself. But they won't be critiquing the centrist Muslim neighbors in the same way. Does that make sense?
I have a comment and also a question for Cheryl. I have a comment. I want to comment on Barbara's question about China and its involvement in a railway in the Yucatan. Barbara asked about whether Mexico is concerned about the Chinese. You can bet your life that the State Department is watching that situation very, very, very closely. No question about it. That is a direct interference in the sphere of influence of the United States. So yeah, Barbara, that's this is, I'm sure, being monitored in Washington very, very closely. But the question I have for Cheryl is, in Uganda right now, there is a law that's been passed, promulgated and supported by American Christian fundamentalists against LGBTQ people. It's incredibly draconian. In some cases, it can result in the death of people convicted of being LGBTQ, and involve long prison sentences for those who are caught in the act, so to speak. Is there any of that going on in Nigeria? Any
I
of
have
that
not-
Christian
yeah.
fundamentalism that's,
Mm,
so typical of what's happening in Uganda?
yeah, that kind of Christianity is rife in Nigeria also. And I have not kept up with the legal status for LGBTQ plus people in Nigeria, but yes, you're correct. It's a massive problem in Africa in general. Uganda, I think, is perhaps the worst at this point that we know of, but yes, that attitude is present in Nigeria and prevalent. And it's one of the places where I personally wish that Nigeria could change for the better. I am personally a very progressive Christian, and I sometimes have to bite my tongue a little bit, and more than a little bit, in conversation with Nigerian Christians. Yeah.
So I just have something to add. All my stories are anecdotal. I mean, because that's all I know. So I know a couple, a lesbian couple that they're both nurses. They have worked or still work for the Red Cross, and I mean they're open. And I'm just like, the first time I met them a few years ago, maybe five or more years ago, and I was like, wow, that's kind of interesting. And I mean, not that I've been in a deep conversation with them, but they're completely open. And they just had a baby, and I mean, it's just like, wow, this is pretty progressive for Mexico, So I don't know. Anecdotally, maybe people are able to be more open. Because Mexico has some traditional culture. One of them, part of it is religion. So, but in that area that we're in, it doesn't, at least the women I know are not having a problem that they feel that they need to move or hide or anything. So that's good.
I have a comment for Cheryl. I'm kind of bowled over by your description of Christian pacifism in the face of the violent murder of people, beloved members of families. And I'm just staggered by the way you described it. And are you saying that in the long term, if people don't retaliate against Boko Haram, in the long term, the peaceful way of life comes back and triumph? I mean, are you saying that it works pragmatically to conquer violence with the kind of Christian pacifism you describe?
Well, first of all, I have to say it's not actually pacifism in the true sense. And I think your question is spot on. And I think the jury's out. What will be the full end result? I don't know. This was when I approached Nigeria, I have to step back as a white person and allow the Nigerian experience to speak as much as I can understand it. And this was the choice the Nigerian church made for itself. Its leadership, I think, has been remarkable in being able to carry the church along in that choice. Yeah, this is one of the fundamental questions for people who work for peace and justice. Is it pragmatic or is it not? So let's take this example of EYN's choice not to retaliate in Northeast Nigeria. They also relied on the Nigerian military. So you have to understand that. And so that it's not a pacifist choice per se. It's a choice not to retaliate in kind. And what that has mean in practice in real life so far is that they have been able to return. They have supported the Nigerian military's attacks on Boko Haram and efforts to root out the insurgency. I think it's almost an impossible question to answer. But all I can say is this is the Nigerian church's experience as I have seen it and understand it.
Cheryl, what's your opinion, Cheryl? What's your take on it? I mean, it sounds to me contradictory. They call in the military
Mhm.
and approve of taking action against these murderers, and yet it's turned the other cheek when it comes to their families. It just sounds like it just sounds very contradictory. What's your personal feeling about it?
My personal feeling is that a lot more people would have died if Christians had turned on their Muslim neighbors. It would have turned into, well, it'd be ethnic violence of the worst kind, really. It would have been, Northern Ireland. It would have been
Okay.
a much longer experience of violence in terms of length of years. So you have to understand that people are living side by side. So some places, so this is a long and complicated story. Some cities like Jos, which experienced religious violence earlier on in the late 20th century, has become really a segregated city. So Christians and Muslims live in different parts of the town now, the city. In Jos, there was widespread mob violence on occasions that just decimated the city for some periods of time. That happened in other cities in northern Nigeria. But in Northeast, these towns in Northeast Nigeria where EYN is sort of, it's in their heartland. These are very small communities that are not segregated, Christians and Muslims in different parts of town, that they're living side by side. And so if you had retaliation going on, you'd have, one family fighting the one right next door and the one across the street, and the church fighting the mosque, the people, and the you'd have just incredible violence. I think probably myself, this is my own personal opinion. It's completely a white person's opinion, a white American opinion, even though I grew up there. So you have to understand that. So this is, don't take it as more than that. But I think the bloodbath would have been 2 or 3 times what it was.
Cheryl, my understanding was that the military was brought in to protect, not to attack. Am I correct or wrong?
Both and. So the military protects communities against attack, but also has bombed and destroyed areas of Northeast Nigeria that in order to try and root out Boko Haram and then the other various groups. So if you've heard of the Sambisa forest, which is where Boko Haram's camps have been located, that's where most people think that people know that the Chibok schoolgirls were held for quite some time before they were kind of dissipated in different areas. And so the military, the Nigerian military, the Air Force has bombed Sambisa Forest at various times, things like that. They bombed out bridges to prevent, at the height of the insurgency, they bombed bridges to prevent Boko Haram movements around northeast Nigeria. So I saw one of those bombed bridges was still being, quote, being repaired, but not very well in 2018 when I was there. So yes, let me talk a bit about the Nigerian military, however. These are mostly very young guys. They're stuck out in the middle of nowhere. Northeast Nigeria is a very, in places pretty desolate and not much in the way of resources or institutions or anything in a lot of places. A lot of them are stuck in little huts, living in little huts on the side of the road where they're supposed to watch, they have barricades to monitor traffic and roadblocks, and they do road checks, and they're supposed to prevent attacks. They had nothing like the weaponry that Boko Haram had. They didn't have the wherewithal to do a whole lot. So I feel for them as much as I feel for anyone. And these are recruits. You know what our military recruits, that's the same kind of young guys. They're stuck out there trying to do their job. Half the time they ran away when a Boko Haram attack came in the community where they were supposed to protect, because who's going to get killed first? It's the military guys who are supposed to protect the community. So then a lot of little groups would form militias, local militias would form to try and protect their own communities. It was a complicated situation. So when we talk about a peace church in the middle of that, you have to understand the complications are just immense. And what does that look like? It probably looks different in every possible iteration of the situation or event. I know that doesn't help, but it maybe tries to explain it a little bit.
Cheryl, what is being done to give the youth this huge bulge, jobs and so forth? And it reminded me when I asked Sherry about China and Mexico. China has put a lot of money into Africa and developing things. Is that filtering down to the area, to Nigeria, anything?
Oh, yeah, Nigeria I think has a lot of interaction with China. But the way China does stuff in Africa, they bring in their own people do the work. I don't think local people get much out of it at all.
Oh, okay.
Yep.
Is the development mainly in roads and so forth?
Roads, dams,
Okay.
electrical projects, you name it. I personally blame the United States for pulling out of Africa to much of an extent, because, I mean, a colonial power is a colonial power. So the US had its own chance at colonial power in Africa. Now it's China's turn. Africa has been torn apart by colonialism for, since forever. Islam took over North Africa back in the 1300s, 1200s. I forget what the date was, but the US really pulled back from Africa at a certain point. I think it was in the 80s. I'm forgetting. This is beyond, I should have worked harder at researching possible questions. But you'll see, you see it when the Western media reports from Africa. The person is actually reporting from Johannesburg in South Africa, and they're talking about Uganda or somewhere like that. We don't have Western interests embedded across Africa anymore at all. So you look at who's in Nigeria, what presence is there in Nigeria? The whole time I was there in March, for 2.5 weeks. This is a really racist way to say it, but you know, we saw we're actually in Nigeria, and there are no
Cheryl,
Americans or Europeans present.
okay, your internet froze up there for a minute.
Oh,
Could you
sorry.
repeat your last couple sentences?
Yeah. So there are virtually no Americans or Western Europeans present in Northeast Nigeria, except for maybe a few NGOs and a couple of schools.
So what is happening? I mean, what's the possibility of the country getting the youth to jobs? What's preventing them from getting jobs? Drought
Well,
or what?
No, I mean, the country has massive amounts of money in terms of its oil. So Southeast Nigeria is a massive oil producer
Oh, I'd forgotten
and
that.
has been for decades and decades. And I think it's a political choice. How are they using the money? Are they using it to benefit the general population, or is it going into the pockets of the powerful?
Hmm.
I gotta go.
Thank you all so much.
This feels like we're just beginning. There's so much to learn here. And not that we expect Cheryl or Sherry to have done all kinds of research for this, because they were busy doing their work. But this is very humbling, and it makes me know how little I know about anything.
Yeah, I really appreciate both of your presentations. Thank you so much.
Oh, thank you. My pleasure, for sure.
So let's do this again in some form, okay?
Mm-hmm.
Let's think about this. Thank you, Cheryl. Thank
For the
you.
knowledge.
Thank you, Sherry.
So I'll see you folks
Mary,
at
this
1
is-
o'clock. out at
This is
Kimball.
recorded, Mary.
Yes.
This is recorded now, and so we could have other people tell other people about it.
Mhm.
We're going to try to post it on our YouTube channel. If I
Okay,
can figure out how to do that.
and once you figure it out, can you send out the link for it?
Yes.
Thank you.
Okay. Thank you, everyone. See you at 1
Later.
o'clock at Kimberlin Grove.
I
Okay.
won't be
Bye.
there today, man.
Okay.
I won't be there today. I'm sick. I'm all congested.
Okay. Thanks for letting me know.
Okay, hope you
Okay.
feel better, Ralph. Bye-bye.
Thank
Bye.
you.